Before you book room 1408, the manager will offer you $50,000 just to turn around and leave. 56 people checked into this exact room. Not a single one survived past 60 minutes. But this weekend, an extreme skeptic just locked himself inside to prove it's all a hoax. He thinks it's a publicity stunt, until the digital clock on the wall starts counting down from 60 seconds, and the room locks him in. What happens when the timer hits 0? You're about to find out. The story begins by introducing Mike Enslin, a cynical and disillusioned author who travels across the country visiting supposedly haunted locations, like bed and breakfasts, graveyards, and old lighthouses. He examines these places with a highly critical eye, testing the EMF meters, checking the walls for hidden mechanisms, and taking meticulous notes on his tape recorder, completely unmoved by the local legends. Mike does not believe in the supernatural. His skepticism stems from a deeply rooted personal grief, having lost his young daughter Katie to a terminal illness years prior. This tragedy caused a massive rift between him and his wife, Lily, leading to their separation. Mike now lives a solitary life, surfing on the beaches of California and writing his books, which sell moderately well, but lack the literary ambition he once possessed. After a book signing at a small, half-empty bookstore where he fields questions from polite but eccentric fans, Mike heads to a local post office to collect his mail. Among the junk mail and fan letters, he finds an anonymous postcard depicting the Dolphin Hotel in New York City. On the back of the postcard, a handwritten message reads, "Don't enter 1408. Intrigued and sensing a compelling final chapter for his upcoming book, 10 Haunted Hotel Rooms, Mike immediately calls the Dolphin Hotel to book room 1408. The receptionist on the phone informs him that the room is unavailable and completely booked, refusing to offer any further explanation. Annoyed by the sudden stone walling, Mike utilizes his legal rights, discovering a New York state law that requires hotels to rent out any vacant room to a paying citizen unless it is under maintenance. He forces his literary agent, Sam Farrell, to threaten legal action against the hotel's parent company. Because of this aggressive legal maneuvering, the hotel reluctantly agrees to honor his reservation. Mike flies to New York City and arrives at the grand, imposing structure of the Dolphin Hotel. The lobby is opulent, bustling, and seemingly ordinary. But the atmosphere shifts dramatically when Mike approaches the front desk and checks in. The receptionist looks uncomfortable and immediately directs Mike to the office of the hotel manager, Gerald Olin. Mike enters the luxurious wood-paneled office of Gerald Olin, who greets him with a polite but deeply serious demeanor. Olin immediately attempts to dissuade Mike from staying in room 1408. He offers Mike a glass of extremely expensive scotch and pulls out a thick, leather-bound dossier containing the horrifying history of the room. Olin explains that in the 95 years since the hotel opened, 56 people have died inside room 1408. He details a gruesome laundry list of natural deaths, strokes, heart attacks, bizarre suicides, and self-mutilations. Olin emphasizes that no one has ever lasted more than an hour inside the room, and the room is kept permanently locked and completely empty of guests to prevent further tragedies. Because Mike remains completely unimpressed and views this presentation as an elaborate marketing ploy designed to drum up publicity, he refuses to back down. Olin even offers Mike a free stay in the hotel's penthouse suite, upgrades for his future trips, and access to rare documents regarding historical hauntings if he agrees to drop his request. Mike adamantly declines, stating that he needs to see the room for himself to write his book. Realizing that Mike cannot be bought or frightened away, Olin reluctantly hands over the brass key to room 1408, warning him one last time that the room is an evil place that actively attacks anyone who crosses its threshold. Olin accompanies Mike up the elevator, but he refuses to step onto the 14th floor itself. As the elevator doors open, Olin stays behind, leaving Mike to walk down the long, unnaturally quiet hallway alone. The carpet is thick, the lighting is dimly oppressive, and the numbering on the doors feels slightly off as the hotel skipped the 13th floor entirely out of superstition, making the 14th floor the actual 13th floor. Mike arrives at the door of room 1408. He inserts the key, turns the lock, and steps inside. Initially, the room appears perfectly mundane, resembling a standard, somewhat dated hotel suite, with 2 twin beds, a desk, a television, and a bathroom. Mike immediately sets up his equipment, turns on his handheld tape recorder, and begins narrating his observations, noting the lack of any immediate paranormal energy and mocking the hotel's dramatic buildup. He tests the water, opens the windows to look out at the New York skyline, and sits down at the desk to unpack his things. Suddenly, the clock radio on the nightstand turns itself on, blasting the song "We've Only Just Begun" by the Carpenters at a deafening volume. Startled, Mike jumps up and shuts it off, assuming it is a timed prank set up by the hotel staff. However, when he looks closely at the digital display, the numbers quickly change from the current time into a bright red countdown timer starting at 60 minutes. This causes Mike to feel the first real prickle of unease. He tries to adjust the thermostat because the temperature in the room begins to skyrocket rapidly, turning the air thick and stifling. When he goes to the bathroom to wash his face with cold water, the hot water tap bursts, scalding his hand with boiling steam. Because of the intense pain, Mike rushes to the window to get some air, but as he slams the window frame down, it crashes violently onto his hand, pinning his fingers and causing an agonizing injury. He manages to free his bleeding hand, but when he looks out the window to shout for help to a man in the building across the street, he notices the man is mimicking his exact movements. Realizing it is his own reflection projecting impossibly across the alleyway, Mike backs away in absolute disbelief. The psychological assault escalates rapidly as the room begins to distort reality around him. Suddenly, a woman appears out of nowhere, lunging directly at him with a blunt tool raised to strike his head. Terrified, Mike ducks and crashes heavily onto the ground to avoid the blow. He instantly scrambles back, raising his arms to shield his face, only to realize that the figure has completely vanished into thin air. There is no one else in the room. Panting heavily on the floor, an intense wave of fear washes over him as he realizes he cannot trust his own senses. Mike attempts to leave the room, grasping the doorknob, but the heavy brass handle detaches completely from the door, leaving him trapped inside. He runs to the telephone to call the front desk, but the operator's voice on the other end sounds distorted, mocking, and deeply menacing, refusing to send help. Following this, the television screen flashes to life on its own, displaying home movies of his deceased daughter Katie and his estranged wife Lily during happier times. This deeply upsets Mike, breaking through his cynical exterior and forcing him to confront his buried grief. As he stares at the screen, the walls of the room begin to weep blood, and the framed paintings of old ships at sea start to shake violently. The painted water begins to overflow from the frames, pouring real, freezing ocean water into the room. Within moments, the floor is flooded, and a massive wave crashes through the wall, sweeping Mike off his feet and dragging him into a swirling, stormy vortex that mimics a drowning incident at sea. Unbeknownst to him, the room uses his own subconscious memories to torture him further. Suddenly, the chaotic water vanishes, and Mike wakes up gasping for air on a sandy beach. He believes he has survived a terrible surfing accident, and that the entire hotel experience was merely a vivid hallucination caused by a concussion. He reunites with Lily, who welcomes him back with open arms. They reconcile, mourn Katie together, and Mike enjoys a long, peaceful period of normalcy, believing his nightmare is finally over. He even goes to a local post office to mail a manuscript about his experience. However, as the postal workers begin to dismantle the walls of the post office right in front of him, Mike watches in horror as the environment crumbles away, revealing the charred and rotting structure of room 1408 beneath. The entire reality of his escape was a cruel illusion generated by the room to crush his hope. He is still trapped inside the suite, and the countdown timer on the clock radio is still ticking down toward zero. The final act begins as the room enters its most aggressive phase. The temperature plummets instantly from sweltering heat to sub-zero freezing conditions. Frost coats the furniture, and Mike's breath turns to heavy vapor. The ghost of his daughter Katie suddenly appears in the center of the room, looking pale and wearing her hospital gown. She runs to Mike, crying out for her father and asking why he couldn't save her. Overwhelmed by raw emotion, Mike tightly holds his daughter, weeping and apologizing for his past failures. But the room cruelly cuts the moment short as Katie's body stiffens, turns to cold ash, and crumbles to dust right in his arms, leaving him screaming in absolute agony. The clock radio begins to count down its final 60 seconds. The warped voice of the hotel operator comes over the speaker, presenting Mike with a final choice. He can either relive the torment of this 1 hour over and over again for eternity, or he can take advantage of the express checkout system. A noose suddenly drops from the ceiling, offering him a quick suicide. Mike, now completely exhausted, physically battered, and emotionally drained, looks at the rope and then looks at the countdown timer. He realizes that the room wants him to kill himself so he can become another permanent statistic in its collection of victims. Refusing to let the room win, Mike decides to destroy it entirely. He takes a bottle of the expensive cognac given to him by Olin, smashes it on the floor, and uses his lighter to set the high-proof alcohol ablaze. The fire spreads rapidly across the curtains, the carpets, and the beds, turning the entire room into a raging, roaring inferno. Mike laughs triumphantly amidst the smoke and flames, knowing that by burning down the room, he ensures that no one else will ever suffer or die inside 1408. He collapses onto the burning floor as the smoke fills his lungs, accepting his fate, and peacefully passes away as the room is consumed by fire. Following this, we cut to Mike's funeral. He is buried in a somber ceremony, attended by his heartbroken, grieving wife, Lily, and his literary agent, Sam. They mourn the tragic loss of a man who spent his life chasing ghosts, only to be consumed by one. After the service, Gerald Olin, the hotel manager, approaches Lily in her car to offer his deep condolences and hands her a box of Mike's personal effects that were recovered from the scorched ruins of room 1408. Lily is too overwhelmed with grief to accept them, refusing to look at anything from that cursed place, leaving Olin to take the box back to his own car. Sitting alone in his vehicle, Olin decides to look through the box himself and pulls out Mike's melted, heavily damaged handheld tape recorder. He presses the play button. At first, it is just static and Mike's initial skeptical commentary. But suddenly, the audio transitions into the unmistakable, chilling sound of Katie's ghostly voice, speaking clearly through the static, talking to her father during the climax of the haunting. Olin gasps in absolute horror, looking up at his rearview mirror, where he sees a terrifying, briefly flashed reflection of Mike's badly burned ghost sitting in the backseat. The ghost vanishes, leaving Olin shaken to his core. The final shot of the film cuts back to the hollowed-out, blackened remains of room 1408. Through the charred doorway, the ghostly apparition of Mike stands by the window, looking out over the New York skyline. He hears his daughter Katie calling out his name from the distance, and as he turns around to walk toward her voice, he fades away into the shadows of the room, permanently trapped, but finally reunited with his daughter in the afterlife. Beyond the ghosts and the jump scares, 1408 leaves us with a chilling realization. The most dangerous room we can ever get trapped in is our own mind when we refuse to heal. Mike built a fortress of cynicism and denial to avoid facing the agonizing pain of losing his daughter. But the room didn't conquer him with monsters. It conquered him by turning his own buried grief, regrets, and unresolved trauma into a weapon against him. It reminds us all that ignoring our deepest pains doesn't make them vanish. It just gives them the power to destroy us from the inside out. In the end, true survival requires confronting our ghosts before they consume us. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a comment to let us know what you think of this ending. See you next time.